Good morning, I'm Anna Marie, and it's time again for Focus. It's a closer look at people, places, and things right here in our own backyard. This morning, we're talking to some people from one of my favorite organizations in the world, March of Dimes. We're going to start with Tamara Curran. Welcome, Tamara.
Thank you. Good morning.
We get you in every year to kind of talk about what's going on with research and new things that are going on. Have we made some big progresses from last year? What's going on? How's the picture changed from last year?
One thing that's changed, of course, our mission today is all about premature birth and preventing families from experiencing tough situations with premature babies. Here in our state and nationally, we've seen a decrease in the number of babies who are born too early.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. With our national report card, for many years, we'd received a failing grade here in Tennessee, and we saw that progress from an F to a D. And then in 2012, we received a C because the number of babies born prematurely in our state are continuing to decline.
Now,
so we're proud of that.
Is that because percentage-wise, or is it because we're having fewer births?
Percentage-wise.
Good.
Yes.
And I believe that's probably partly because we have also fewer people having elective births where they're delivering their children early because it's convenient, right? And didn't I see a campaign, was March of Dimes behind that campaign to remind people not to just have their baby early because it's convenient, because early is still early and it still poses more risk?
Absolutely, yes. Even those babies born just a few weeks early, there are still some health risks. And they often, even though they're a good weight and appear healthy and normal, they spend some time in the NICU as well because of underdeveloped lungs and having those breathing issues, and also not being able to feed and latch on to breast or bottle. But you definitely have seen more advertisements about that initiative. Mm-hmm. We have here in our state partnership with the Tennessee Department of Health, the Hospital Association, and Perinatal Quality Care Group that deals more with the clinical aspect of the issue. So lots of different partners. Really, the main message is for women not to choose to have their baby early. It's best for baby to be born on its own.
And the number of women who were choosing was something like a third or some high number, wasn't it? How much was it? Do you remember?
Very high number. Nationally, when we look at a pregnancy being 40 weeks is full term, we saw that between 34 and 36 weeks, about 70% of all births were within that period nationally.
Wow.
And of course, some of that is your mom goes into labor early, or there may be a decision to induce mom early because of situations like preeclampsia or high blood pressure during pregnancy. Mm-hmm. Any of those situations, we definitely want doctors to make the decision about if baby needs to be born early for mom and baby to be safe. But there are situations where it's just about convenience, as you said. You know, I would like for my baby to be born around the holidays when family is here, or I need to get back to work for a big project. So I need to time the delivery within this period. Yeah. But we know that's not a good situation for babies.
Was there some sort of a push to educate doctors about that fact, too? Because I was shocked to know so many doctors would say, yeah, let's go ahead and do it.
Yes, definitely a push on both sides for moms and families, but also for physicians. There are situations where doctors who are delivering in rural areas where there may not be access if mom goes into labor at a certain time, there may have to be a scheduling for delivery. But the national recommendation is no scheduling for delivery before 39 weeks. We know pregnancy's full term at 40, but nationally it's been deemed safe for 39 weeks.
What else is March of Dimes putting these dollars toward?
Our dollars are put towards research, education, community services. We've touched on education a bit, our education being for families in the community, women of childbearing age, as well as physicians. We also distribute community grants to agencies who are working with women of childbearing age or families to educate them about preterm labor or not scheduling to deliver a baby early. Mm-hmm. Also, our research dollars for projects that help us understand why premature birth is happening, or once babies are born early, how we can help them better.
So there are some specific risk factors that we know about that cause premature births.
Yes, lots of different causes. It's a very complicated health condition. women who smoke during pregnancy, it's a big predictor of premature birth and even babies who are smaller. Also, complications like preeclampsia. We keep mentioning that women who have high blood pressure during pregnancy. Any other health conditions like diabetes that a woman has before she's pregnant, or even gestational diabetes that develops while she's pregnant. Any of the things that are present before she's ever pregnant, being pregnant can escalate or elevate a lot of those conditions. So lots of different causes involved. Some of them are preventable. So one of the most important factors is prenatal care, or even care before they're ever pregnant. The healthier she is before she's pregnant, the healthier she'll be for her baby.
Right. What about obesity? Has that been found to be a factor?
Yes, it is.
Because I think that's not always mentioned, but that's a big deal. Obesity not only can cause premature birth, but it also can help cause diabetes, which can help cause premature birth.
Yes.
There's so many things all rolled together in that one factor.
Yes, and a lot of the risk factors we talk about are risk factors for lots of different health conditions.
And then there's that whole category of premature births that we don't even know what causes it.
Yes, about 50% of all preterm births, we don't know the cause. And about 50%, as we mentioned, can be linked back to some risk factor.
How often is preterm birth or premature birth fatal?
Preterm birth is the leading cause of death within the first month of life.
Wow.
Yes. And about 10%, a little under 10% of all babies here in Tennessee will not see their first birthday. Now, there are several different causes, but preterm birth is the leading cause within the first month of life.
Wow. What are the other things that cause a higher infant mortality rate here in Tennessee?
Lots of different things play a role. We see, some of those breathing issues are definitely going to play a role within that first month of life, but sometimes it's related to sleeping issues. We do have a partnership here in Tennessee related to safe sleep. Sometimes it's about families sleeping with their babies or babies not sleeping in a crib that's safe, maybe stuffed animals there or too many blankets, or the sleep position. It's recommended that babies sleep on their back. So that can play a role as well, and we see some of those numbers being included in the infant mortality rates here in Tennessee.
What are the issues with sleeping with a family member? Because everybody wants to sleep huddling that little baby.
Yes. Well, we know that during newborn stage, parents are tired. And so sleeping with the baby and maybe unintentionally rolling over on a baby in a bed or, dips in a mattress that may not be safe, or sleeping in a crib with, blankets that may eventually cover up the baby, or crib bumper guards and things like that. So that's definitely a big risk, but very preventable.
And as the new rules have kind of kicked in and people have started to really start to adopt them, like having a baby sleep on his or her back,
yes.
Have we seen the number of SIDS cases, sudden infant death syndrome cases, drop?
Mm-hmm. We are definitely seeing a decline. We know our partners at the Department of Health are definitely working statewide to educate families about the importance of safe sleep, and we have started to see a dwindling of those numbers.
Is it because a baby can't lift his head up? If he gets rolled over and he gets where he can't breathe, he can't lift his head up.
Yes, that's one reason. If a baby's on their stomach and, moves their head for some reason and it gets face down, that can definitely be a problem. Also, choking. We would tend to think that a baby can choke if they're on their back, if they cough or spit up, but it's actually safer because of the way the anatomy works. It's safer if they're on their back and something happens versus on their stomach. They can choke on those fluids.
Okay. Is there anything else that you think is important to add that we haven't mentioned so far, Tamara?
I think one thing is our 75th anniversary with March of Dimes. We are definitely an organization that's looking for new and innovative ways to support families. And in those 75 years, that's what our mission has always been about. Though it's changed a little bit from the beginning to where it is now, we're still advocates for families and mothers and babies, and trying to educate the community about how to have healthier pregnancies and better outcomes for babies will definitely be a part of our mission for years to come.
Tamara Curran, thank you so much. And now for our next guest, Amy Pate. Amy and her husband, Bob, and your son's name is what?
His name is Hawkins.
And you're the ambassador family this year for the March of Dimes?
Yes.
For March of Dimes?
Yes.
What does the ambassador family mean? What does that mean for you?
Basically, we're just the face of the March of Dimes this year. We're just putting a story to do all the work that the March of Dimes does. We want to show people the effects of the March of Dimes, how they really do help people.
Well, what is your story, Amy?
Well, 6 years ago, my first child, Hawkins, was born, and it was a routine pregnancy. Everything was great. I did everything that you're supposed to do, take care of myself, and just went to the doctor for a routine checkup at 30 weeks and was immediately put in the hospital, and he was born 5 days later.
Wow.
It was a shock.
Why suddenly was the baby born? What was going on?
I had preeclampsia, which is just a condition where you have really high blood pressure, which could lead to a stroke and death, for the mother and the child. And so since I was so early, they tried to hold off labor as long as possible, but it just got to a point where my health was deteriorating so fast. It was better for both of us for him to be delivered.
Do they know what causes preeclampsia?
No. It's something that's been around as long as women have had babies. There's some different theories or different studies, but no, they don't know a cause. So, a lot of babies are born prematurely due to preeclampsia.
I bet you were stunned.
I was. I'd never thought of prematurity. When I was pregnant, I would think, I hope there's no birth defects. I didn't know anybody that had premature babies. That didn't even enter my consciousness.
So you were planning on the baby being born in what month?
In March. In fact, his due date was St. Patrick's Day. Mm-hmm. And so I had that in my head as a, little St. Patrick's Day baby. But I instead had a January 9th baby.
Do you remember when you told Bob about it?
Yeah, I called him. And so he came to the doctor's office, right away. And I didn't even go home to get clothes or anything. They just sent me straight over to the hospital. And so he kind of got a bag for me as best he could. But even at that point, I just thought, okay, so, Hawkins is going to come earlier than I thought, but it would not surely be 10 weeks early. I still at that point never thought that he would be born so soon and so small. It was our first pregnancy. We didn't know what to expect, what was going to happen. You just have that naive thought that everything's just going to be fine, and it wasn't. And so that was scary.
Okay, and now, Bob, I want to hear from your viewpoint, because your wife is calling you and telling you what?
Yeah, so Amy called me and said, get down here, my blood pressure is high. And we knew it was high before because we'd been in Knoxville at her family's house, and she was swollen a little bit, and we really didn't know what that meant. But at the doctor's office, the nurse took her blood pressure and said, "Why didn't you call us?" And then everything seemed to go in hyperspeed after that, where it seemed like instantaneously we were in another room. She was getting a steroid shot in her stomach, and I was really in shock from that point on.
Because what did that mean that she had high blood pressure? You knew she had high blood pressure, and why didn't you call? And
I really didn't know the danger Amy was in. I was thinking about our baby and all the thoughts of what that was going to mean. Was this going to be a special needs baby? I had no idea what that was going to look like. I was nervous about having a baby anyway, and then here we were in this situation. And then fast forward to realize that Amy's health was really in jeopardy as well.
Do you remember what you told her on the phone?
I think I probably just said, it's going to be okay, it's going to be okay, it's going to be okay. But I was probably telling myself that just as much as I was telling Amy. And then even when we got there, it's going to be okay, it's going to be okay. And I think we just kept telling each other that. I think some days we believed it more than others.
How did you feel when you found out that meant your baby was going to have to be born very, very early?
Well, I think at that moment we didn't know how early, because then we went to the hospital and our doctor said, we're going to try to keep the baby in you for 2 more weeks. And then it was, okay, we're just going to try to go for another week. And then it was another day. And then it was, oh, yeah, you're having a baby in a couple hours. It was just a surreal moment.
And how long had the baby been cooking? As you say, how long had...
I had just started my 3rd trimester. So he was born at 30 weeks, and a baby normally is 40 weeks.
That had to be very scary.
It was. It was so scary. And I'm the kind of person that I like to know. When I was in the hospital and I knew that he'd be born early, I started, Googling preemies. What's going to happen? What's this going to be like? What problems is he going to face?
Yeah.
And a neonatologist came to my room to talk to me to kind of say preemies are at higher risk for cerebral palsy. Preemies are higher risk. This is kind of what you can expect. You can plan on him being in the hospital probably until around his due date. I just wanted to know. I want to know too much. I just had no control, so I wanted to have control of something. And if I had some kind of knowledge, I thought that would help.
What about you?
I'm not quite to that level as Amy is, But that level of curiosity is great because Amy and I were both very informed of everything. However, the internet's also a source of a lot of fear because people put their worst case scenarios on the internet. So we had all these scenarios in our head, and I felt like we were prepared, but there was just a lot of scenarios on the internet that scared us.
How big was Hawkins? How much did he weigh, and what were his problems or challenges when he was born?
When he was born, he weighed 3 pounds, 3 ounces. He was so tiny, but he was so cute. He was just a little mini baby, you know? I mean, I didn't think that a 3-pound baby would look like a baby. Of course, there was a NICU team in the operating room, and they, bundled him up and whisked him off. And I remember they kind of just quickly let me just look at him for a second. And I said, "Oh, he has the prettiest lips." Of course, the memories, bring a lot of emotion. But, and they kind of just put his little face on my face and let me kiss his little lips. And that's a memory I'll always have.
He had a full head of hair too, which you don't.
He did. He had a lot of hair.
A little 3-pound baby, and it's hard to describe. But
we always said a pound of it was hair.
Yeah, and his little skin was just loose on him, but Amy's health was in jeopardy. I remember thinking, do I stay with Amy? Do I go with the baby? And Amy said, "No, go." And I mean, we ran down the hall to the NICU. They put him right in the isolette that keeps him warm. And they just started saying all the rules of the NICU. It was all like a blur. Then I just wandered down the hall and thought, what in the world is going to happen to our lives? And the next 48 hours, Amy was out of it. Her blood pressure would not come down. There was possibility of stroke. I remember the nurses kept saying, "You've got to get your family out of here," because we had just a crush of people come to the hospital. And they all wanted to see Amy, see the baby. And the nurses said, "You've got to get these people out of here." So Amy's grandmother, who she's very close to, and this is emotional for me because I got everyone out of the room, and her grandmother sat there and just told her stories and kind of brought everything down a notch. And so 48 hours after that, Amy's blood pressure finally came down, but she was on magnesium, which was terrible. It was just excruciating for her. And Hawkins was in the NICU, and his weight actually dipped down to 2 pounds, 12 ounces. Because his lungs are not developed, they can't feed him. And so he got down to 2 pounds and 12 ounces before they could start feeding him. It was just a crazy time.
How did you get through all of that? What did you do, Bob? Because you had both of them.
We had a lot of family support. We had a lot of support from our church. We had wonderful doctors, from Amy's OB, Dr. Kaiser, to the team of neonatologists at Baptist, to our primary nurse at the NICU, April Graves, who was just the most important person in our life for 46 days.
How long did he stay in the hospital?
He was in the hospital for 46 days. So it wasn't completely smooth sailing in the NICU. It was a long and hard journey in the NICU, but it wasn't an unusual one. He had a blood transfusion. That was probably my lowest day. It was towards the end of his NICU stay, and Hawkins had 2 main problems. The first were his lungs were just very underdeveloped, and that's something where the March of Dimes really helped Hawkins, because right after he was born, he got surfactant therapy, which is a drug that the March of Dimes helped develop, and it just helps preemies' lungs because their lungs are not ready for air. They're supposed to, be in water still. Right. But he did have surfactant therapy, and so that kept him off a ventilator, but yet he had to have oxygen the whole time he was in the NICU. They would try to wean him off the oxygen, and he just would struggle. And I just thought, when are you ever just going to be able to breathe? And so towards the end of the NICU stay, they said, well, he really needs a blood transfusion, and that could maybe help with his breathing and things like that. And the preemies are so small, of course, their little veins are so small. And they were trying to get the IV in for the blood transfusion, and it was just, they couldn't do it. They ended up having to put it in his head. That was just a really hard day. But that's very common. Preemies, they're so anemic, so they need a blood transfusion just to get their red blood cells higher. And he also had, his lungs, he had a little infection in his lungs. And of course, with that, I thought, did I bring those germs to him? You kind of go through that cycle of, did I do something wrong? Like, what could I have done differently to make my baby not be sick? The breathing was the biggest issue. And then his feeding. He had a problem taking a bottle. It's things you don't even think about for normal babies, but preemies, they can't coordinate the suck, swallow, breathe. And so they're tube fed for a long time until they're old enough where that reflex is supposed to kick in where they can eat. Mm-hmm. He just had problems with reflux and feeding, and he didn't want to eat. We couldn't get him to eat. He just didn't want to.
How much did he weigh when you finally got to take him home, and what was that homecoming day like?
Oh, it was wonderful. He weighed 5'11", which is, big for a preemie. I mean, he was getting to be one of the biggest ones in the NICU because he'd been there for a while, and his breathing was really the main thing that was keeping him in the NICU. So he did come home on oxygen, but that didn't last too long after we got home.
What do you think, Dad? How was that homecoming day?
It was great. It was very scary because we came home with monitor where when he slept, we wrapped this band around his chest. And if he were to stop breathing, this alarm, it was like your smoke alarm went off. And that, to go back to my worst day in the NICU, was Super Bowl Sunday. And we, on our routine visit there, we were at the NICU, 2-3 times a day. And this was during the Super Bowl. And I was going to try to sneak out to see if Peyton Manning was going to do it this time or whatever. And as I was thinking that in my head, Hawkins forgot to breathe and he started turning blue. And to see that was just like, wow. And then that coupled with having to take infant CPR and to think like, wow, we may have to use this. So all that in my head, and then bringing Hawkins home and realizing this is a great day. He's home, but wow, there's a lot of responsibility here.
And now his life is in your hands, and the nurses and doctors aren't around to help.
Right. That first day, constantly checking that apnea monitor, constantly. And I think all parents do that with no matter how your baby is. You're like, are they still breathing? But we really did that. We really were standing over Hawkins saying, okay, I see his lungs moving. It's okay.
With help from organizations like March of Dimes, there have been some amazing advancements made. My brother was born prematurely about 42 or 43 years ago, and he has cerebral palsy. But I do remember after we took him home, and I'd forgotten about it completely, that there were 3 of us older kids, and I remember us taking turns watching him to make sure he kept breathing. Mm-hmm. And I'd completely forgotten about that because that was just horrifying.
Well, really, before Hawkins was born, everybody's heard of the March of Dimes, I think. But I think about it all the time about there are babies over at Vanderbilt, Centennial Baptist, NICUs everywhere. And there are today babies being born and the families know nothing about surfactant therapy, really what the March of Dimes is about. And today they'll know. And that therapy will keep their baby alive. And it is the most important thing for us.
When your child got surfactant therapy, did you know at that point that it was March of Dimes research?
No. I think there's lots of things that the March of Dimes has done that you just don't know, that it's just a routine thing and you just kind of take it for granted that somebody developed it, but you don't think who or when or how. Because it's not important until you need it.
It's not important until you need it. Mm-hmm.
Well, also, it's no respecter of income or class. I mean, we saw wealthy people in the NICU. We saw people who looked like they didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. And all those babies received the same care, the same love, the same surfactant therapy, which I think is an amazing testament to the work the March of Dimes does.
Tell me now, how is your son? How old is he? What's going on?
He is 6. He just had his 6th birthday in January, and he is just typical 6-year-old little boy. He loves Legos. He's just Lego crazy. And he just is wild and plays with his friends, and he's in kindergarten, and he's just so precious. He lost a tooth. This morning he came down, he said, I got money. The tooth fairy had brought his money. And so he's just so wonderful.
So he doesn't have any problems right now?
He does not. He does not have any lingering problems. Once we got through about the first 18 months, he became quote unquote normal. Mm-hmm. And that's what everybody would say. Like once they reach the 2-year mark, they'll catch up. And, I would always hear that and think, oh, it's never going to happen. I can remember being in the NICU where both my hands would cover his whole body. That's kind of how you hold them. You just put your hands in their isolette, their little bed. and you just put your hands on him, and that's the only way, you can touch him or hold him. And now he is so big. Now his legs are so long and he's so tall. I can't believe it. I couldn't even imagine him starting kindergarten when he was born. And just to have him so healthy and so whole is
And his sister Langley was born almost 3 years to the day with no complications. And then his sister Hampton was born last year, almost 10 pounds.
Yes.
Just almost 3 times the weight of Hawkins.
Yeah.
I have to ask, especially since you didn't have any signs or symptoms or any clue at first with your very first baby that something might be going wrong. Did it make you hesitate when you started?
Oh, absolutely. But with him being, so healthy and happy, I thought I can do this again. Like, if we have to go through this, the outcome of this, wonderful child is worth it.
We had great counsel from, again, our doctors, from Dr. Kaiser, from perinatologists, from everyone. And when Langley was born, our second one, Amy was at the doctor every week with an ultrasound. And that whole pregnancy, we really walked on eggshells. Mm-hmm. But it all worked out great.
Anything else that you think it's important, maybe that parents know or just that people know who are listening?
Yeah, just that the March of Dimes does wonderful work. I mean, like I said, it doesn't become important to you until you need it. And, it's something that everybody can identify with. Everybody might not have kids, might not have babies, but everybody was a baby. So it's something that affects us all. And to stop prematurity, to end birth defects, I mean, it's just amazing. The March of Dimes is 75 years old this year. And originally it was started by FDR to end polio. And they achieved it. Polio is non-existent. No one gets polio in America anymore. And so I just think, how wonderful if 75 years from now they could say, 75 years ago, the mission was to end prematurity, and now we never hear about prematurity. Prematurity doesn't exist. I think that it's just such a wonderful organization that does great work.
Yeah, I would say if not for the March of Dimes, in another time, another place, our story would have ended a lot differently, a lot worse. So support the March of Dimes because you don't know who you're helping, but you're helping someone.
Thank you so much for joining us. Before we get out of here, we want to talk to Philip Toothman with March of Dimes about March for Babies. It's what day?
Sunday, April 21st out at Centennial Park.
He did his announcer voice. That's great. And we're kind of going at it a little bit different direction this year. We want to remind people that we want you out there, but if you can't come out to March for Babies, there's still a way for you to participate because we still need the help.
That's exactly right.
A lot of people are doing things online these days, and March of Dimes is no exception. Now you can go online, put your team together, make your pledges, and get all your friends to join, right?
That's exactly right. We always have a great turnout at the March for Babies events. We're expecting something like 6,500 people this year.
Right.
And I think that some people think, well, if I want to get involved with the March of Dimes, I have to be involved in the physical walk over at Centennial Park.
But maybe I've got plans that day, or the kids have games and I can't go. So, Philip, what do?
What you do is you go to marchforbabies.org. It's the easiest, most streamlined way to be involved with the Music City March for Babies, which is on Sunday, April 21st. And you can form a team. You can invite all your friends to donate to your team. There's no set amount. It's very easy. It's a secure website platform. And that's what we encourage everyone to do because family teams is what makes everything that we do possible.
Oh, really? So you get kind of the most support from family teams.
That's right.
So go to marchforbabies.org.
Correct. And it lets you select the walk site that you want to take part in. You name your team, and it's really, really easy process. It takes a couple minutes. Then it asks you to tell all of your friends through Facebook or on Twitter, and then they can donate directly from your team using their debit card. It's really, really simple.
If you can't understand it, ask your kid or your grandkid, and they will walk you through the process. Now, one of the reasons that we're encouraging you to join March for Babies online this year is because people come up with all kinds of excuses and all kinds of things to do in their lives. What is it they usually say, Phil?
Well, they usually say, oh, I'm busy that day, or I just, I can't round up all of my friends and make it out to Centennial. But that's really not necessary. You don't have to do that now with the advances in technology that we have, even at the March of Dimes.
Marchforbabies.org is where you do that online. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you very much.
Our wonderful Focus editor and producer is Zach Troutman. I want to make sure and mention him. You can read more about today's topic on our Focus page at mix929.com. And if you have any questions or comments about the show or ideas for upcoming Focus topics, you can always email us at focus@mix929.com. Make sure you join us next Sunday. I'm Anna Marie, and that's Focus.